kind of like this morning session, we're gonna finish up with a more maybe fun outside the box talk from Yak Nak, who is third year med student, working hard in clinics, right?
Yes.
Today even, and he's actually gonna do Master's of Public Health next year.
Yep.
And then come back. Take it away.
Well, good afternoon. Sorry for keeping everyone waiting. But I have big shoes to fill because I heard last year there was something about bridging the gaps. That was the last presentation. So let me see if I can top that off. And before presenting any presentation, I've always wanted to try this. So when I say M-I-Z, you say C-O-U. Okay, cool. So like Dr. Cook was telling you, we have our clinical rotations and we have to rotate from various areas over the university. And one place we always have to rotate on surgery and internal medicine is the VA. And if you ask all my friends, I absolutely love the VA. I mean, vets are awesome to talk to, and I chat with them all the time. So I always think back on my VA experience, especially on surgery, and also because of this guy right here, President Truman, who's from Kansas City. So I have direct loyalty to him already. He's a Kansas City native. But this is me, my surgery rotation. Look how happy I look, right? The green scrubs with the scrub cap, my glasses and everything. I was so happy to be on surgery. It was such a great time. I think we had an opening robotic. I forget. They're close to seconds today. But look how happy I look. But I wasn't happy because we have our shelf exams and those are brutal. So the whole entire vibe changes throughout the whole entire rotation. But one thing I always do after rotation, I'm in a long distance relationship. My girlfriend who lives in New York, she works in finance, and I always treat myself to go visit her after a shelf exam on Fridays, which I'm doing actually this weekend. So tomorrow I'm actually going to New York to see her. This is her, this is us, and that's in Brooklyn Bridge. So she surprised me with a gift to go watch my favorite basketball team, the Celtics. I'm a diehard Celtics fan. John Rondo deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. All of the above. He's the best basketball player to ever walk the earth. So this is me. This is us right after the Celtics game. Look how exhausted I am. I had my shelf 24 hours before. Look at my girlfriend, Sasso, and then look at me. I guess I'm amazing. Who's that? Just look in my eyes. I just look. You just zoom in, and zoom in, and zoom in, and zoom in, and zoom in close enough. A little bit more, a little bit more. Does anyone know what this is? No, it's not the eclipse. Good call. But no, this is the first picture ever of a black hole. And that was done. Guess where they took this picture? University of Arizona. Shout out Andy. But 2017, they took this photo of the black hole. And I love physics and gravitational. If I could go to another field, that's probably something I'd go into. But I bring up this quote to say this. It's one of my favorite quotes. Any man whose errors take 10 years to correct is quite a man. But a man who must pause and correct his errors every minute is a maniac. You know who said this? J. Robert Oppenheimer. This is him. So, and his nickname is Oppie. But back to me, right? So this is me having my surgery rotation. How do I go from this to this? And to answer this question, we kind of have to explore the narrative and look at the essence of joy in orthopedics. So I have no disclosures to give. Like what Dr. Cook said, my name is Yak. I'm a third-year medical student that has fully declared interest in orthopedic surgery with hopes of applying 2026 after taking a year-long stint at Hopkins for my MPH with tuition covered. So I want to thank every single one of you guys for every single one of y'all for being here today. I know it's Friday, it's the weekend coming close, the weather is nice, so hopefully we can leave on a good note. So I like to start presentations with thanks and gratitude. And I probably wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for Dr. Kylo, Dr. Michelle Kylo. She's basically one of my first mentors. She's basically like a second mother to me. And she's basically the person that showed me what joy in medicine looks like and practicing that. She's a developmental pediatrician and works for Children's Mercy. previously, and now does various roles. So I actually started this morning. But I would like to thank other mentors that helped me get along this path. So Dr. Kylo, who introduced me to pediatrics at Children's Mercy. She paired me with Dr. Schwinn, who's a pediatric spine surgeon at Children's Mercy. That was the first time I ever walked into the OR, saw a case with a 12-hour spine scoliosis case, and he didn't let me sit down because he was like, surgeons don't sit. So I was like, what, 18, standing in the OR for 12 hours. So that's Dr. Schwinn, Dr. Kyle, an ankle surgeon at Arizona. I'm best friends with his son. Dr. Bindock, when I was thinking about becoming a neurosurgeon, he's also in Arizona. Dr. Mesfin, we might know him. So I kind of combined neurosurgery and the spine in a way. And then he left me and went to Texas and left me with Dr. Choma. He's also been a great preclinical mentor. And then my clinical mentor is Dr. Gupta. So all combined, all these mentors, is kind of like my interest in neurosurgery, spine, orthopedics, and trying to combine that in. But I forgot to mention one person. There's this person right here that I'm kind of thankful for. He's kind of taught me about how fun, how joyful loving what you do can be. Okay, so research. So my hypothesis, how do we change burnout, reframe it, joy? So if you look at the literature across the board, there's these 3 big papers that come out that talk about physicians turnover, physicians leaving their practice, or physician suicide, right? Where a lot of people don't talk about. So there's a big question. We always talk about burnout, 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 burnout. We've heard all the talks. We've gotten all the cookies and the foods and the pizza to try to combat our burnout while we're working our 24-hour shift. That doesn't really work. So I think one of the biggest things that we can do is try to reframe, right? That's one of the biggest things that you do in cognitive behavioral therapy, reframing thoughts. So overview, how do we increase joy in practice? So first, we're gonna go over the factors. We're gonna look at the numbers because I know there's a lot of research heavy people on here. We're gonna look at the consequences, and then also what's gonna be our protection plan, right? Like defensive coordinators. Does anyone know who this is? This is Dr. Freudenberger. He's the individual that actually came up with the term burnout. He described it first in the 1960s, was working with people that worked in public health and people that were just social workers. And they would get to a state of work where they'd be so fatigued where they would just kind of like look in the distance while their cigarette is burning. And they used to call that burnout. So that's where that term comes from, burnout. But I hate the word burnout. Why can't we, reframe it to loss of joy, right? Because burnout focuses way too much on the individual and doesn't focus enough on institution or the work environment or all those factors that are there. Because those are what lead to burnout, not the person. It's not their fault. So, does anyone know who this is? This is Christina Maslach. You probably heard of her because of the Maslach burnout inventory. She's at UC Berkeley, I believe. And she came up with the Maslach burnout inventory where you look at, emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, personal accomplishment, or engaged, effective, or extended. And you kind of get a score, and that's how close you get to burnout. So how do we take burnout, right? That's how we look like, and sometimes how I look like when I'm studying for my surgery shelf exams, right? And how do we reframe it to loss of joy? How do we reframe it? Okay, so first we need to define it. So he first defined it as a state of mental and physical exhaustion caused by one's professional development, right? Professional life, sorry. And I like to highlight that word professional because it's the environment that you're in. But it comes in a triad. One arm of that triad is thinking about emotional exhaustion, and another arm is the moral injury. And all of these three form this trifecta to kind of really consider loss of joy. So emotional exhaustion, almost to the point where, say I have a patient that comes to me in clinic, right? We're trying to consider going to surgery. What are we going to do? But this patient is, continuing to smoke, or this patient doesn't have a ride to clinic, or they're food insecure. And I kind of can't do anything in my role to help that. And before those things are addressed, I can't take them to surgery. At a certain point, that's going to make me exhausted if I see that over and over and over in clinic. What about moral injury? What about those patients that come from the PCP excited for a back surgery because they have back pain, think they're going to be operated on, but you really don't have an operative indication for their surgery? And you have to tell them no, and hear them cry and say, like, I've been everywhere. Like, at what point do you get to saying, you know what, I'm just going to try to operate, you know, the indications right there, trying to fix their problem, and then they have a complication? That causes moral injury. So what are some of the driving factors, right, of limited joy? So work and family stressors are associated with more limited joy in practice, which kind of makes intuitive sense. So there was a study of 21 orthopedic residents and 25 full-time faculty, and they basically were assessing burnout. And what they noted was that with higher rates of burnout, they had higher lower quality of life, exhaustion, depersonalization. But the interesting thing was what they found is that it correlated with, you know, weekly work hours, work-life conflict, discord with colleagues, debt load, and work-related stress. This is why I don't like the word burnout, because it leaves out all these factors. These considers the factors around it. Because imagine if you had a better debt load or financial option. What if you had amazing colleagues and coworkers and co-residents that can increase your joy in practice? And then it decreases when you start to discuss your concerns. So that means, the attending coming into the trauma call room and talking about stories about, how they struggled so much as a resident, how fatigued and tired they were going through that process. That allows you to relate to them and realize, like, okay, like if they can do it, I can also do it. That decreases burnout, increases your level of joy. So let's look at the numbers. So we've done a survey, or there was a survey that was done that looked at burnout within orthopedic surgeons, and they saw between 2011 to 2014 that there was an increase in burnout among orthopedic surgeons, but for some reason between 2017 to 2020, there's been a decrease. So what did they find? What was the biggest thing? Like, where did orthopedic surgeons land? Because this is done from the American Society of Surgeons. Like, where specifically were the orthopedic surgeons? And it showed that orthopedic surgeons were at the top 5% for symptoms of burnout in 2014, but they're below the mean in 2020. But even though they were below the mean, almost over a third of them, 37% to be exact, had symptoms of loss of joy, which we like to call burnout. So it's kind of the numbers. Let's look more of the numbers, right? So there was a study of 661 orthopedic residents in 2020 that were noted to have positive screenings for burnout, right? 52% of them. Out of 661 people, 52% of them had positive screening for burnout. And mind you, this 52%, I think might be a little bit lower, because think about the people that are not going to say they have burnout or can recognize it in themselves. So depression, 13%, and greater emotional exhaustion correlated with earlier years in training, which kind of makes sense. If I was a PGY1 or PGY2, learning everything brand new, I mean, I'll be stressed. I'm not efficient as much. High workload, inability to attend medical appointments. If I can't go see the dentist, I can't go see my PCP. If I can't go see my other attendings that take care of my own health, how am I going to take care of someone else? Lack of exercise, lack of program support. So this is kind of what the numbers are showing about lack of joy. So what are some of the consequences? So one consequence is increasing medical errors. There's a systematic review that kind of looked at 14 studies of 27,000 surgeons, and they identified that burnout was associated with a 2.5-fold increase in involvement with medical errors. There's cognitive impairment, right? With cognitive impairment, you could see in patients and attendings and residents that when they measure their prefrontal cortex and their ability to make decisions, decreases the more loss of joy that they have. And it goes on and on. It can cause harm to organizations, worse experience for patients and colleagues, which is kind of interesting. It showed data that there was an increase in temper in individuals that are practicing, residents and attendings. The temper was a lot increased. Well, if I was a colleague of a burnt out physician that was next to me, of course I would have a worse experience if the temper would increase. And then there's also patient access to care, satisfaction, and adherence. I couldn't find a really good logo for this one to match all this, so I just decided to go with this one. But the protection. So let's bring it all to an end here, right? I mean, we're all about surgeons in here, like what are the things, what's the protection plan, what's the action, what's gonna happen, what can we do? Right? One of the biggest things is engagement, right? Be fully engaged in whatever you're doing, fully engaged in that patient visit, even though you're like 5, 6 patients behind. No, be fully engaged when you're writing your note. Be fully engaged when you're with your peers. Be fully engaged when you're with your family, with your kids, with your wife, with your husband. Be fully engaged. Do meaningful work, and that can be defined as anything, right? For me, that means a lot of different things. I feel like meaningful work is when I can actually connect with the patient, hear their story. That's meaningful work. And then doing a fulfilling activity, reducing a fractures per performance, right? I mean, I remember seeing when I was in the peds ED for my pediatric rotation, just seeing the amount of kids, I think there was a few residents that were there with me, just getting the x-ray, seeing that there was a distal radius that was fractured, but they didn't have to go to surgery, giving the kiddo like ketamine, and you reduce the fracture and then giving them the pink like cast. Like that was so fulfilling. And then seeing the mom happy and everyone happy, like that's such a fulfilling feeling. And the only reason I was able to get there is because I was engaged and I find the work meaningful. So 20%, that's the number that came out, right? So there's this place called Mayo Clinic that came out and said, so if you do, it was found that we had a survey of 465 physicians, and they found that for those physicians that had less than 20% of their work being meaningful, increased the higher rates of burnout or loss of joy. So try to aim for whatever you do in your day, minute, if you break down your schedule, like how are you going to get 20% of your workday to have something meaningful? And that can mean anything. That can mean watching a YouTube video, or watching highlights of Rajon Rondo, or watching the cheese play, or connecting with a kiddo in clinic. If you do 20% of that throughout the week, then you can combat a little bit of that loss. So these are the biggest things, right? The factors, we went over that. We went over the numbers. We went over the consequences. And we came up with a protection plan. So the biggest takeaway is I just want everyone to kind of like remember this, take a picture of it or whatnot, if you want, or if you have a photographic memory, you can call this, is that just this trifecta here is what's driving, loss of joy in practice. So I like to share my 4 joys, and you can kind of think about your 4 joys. Number 1, first and foremost, is family. Number 2, my friends. Number 3, kind of combine patients, education, and research. Those are like the 3 pillars I live by professionally. And then number 4, Kansas City. Like I love KC. Anything to do with Kansas City, I love. So you can see a mix of that up here in these pictures. This is my brother right under me, Mark. This is Emmanuel when he was graduating college last year. It's me, my dad when I was in Arizona, my sister, my mom, my dad. Me trying to figure out how to fix a tibial plateau. These are like my closest friend group. We call each other Sunday Fun Day. One of the only reasons why we survived med school. I think this dude's a resident here. Yeah, and then what other? And then here, a trip to Africa, we were able to meet orthopedic surgeons I'm working on research projects with my mentor, Dr. Cook, Dr. Mien, who's a general surgeon that's there. And we're all in his office. And I didn't get the memo. Everyone's wearing pants except me, but I thought it would be hot. This is me, and this is us at a rural village in South Sudan. And I'm shaking hands with this with this gentleman. He's about roughly the same age as me. And it's kind of crazy to think like, I could have easily been in his shoes and he could have easily been in my shoes. The only thing that separated us was just the Atlantic Ocean. This is I think we had 700 registrants for this complex living deformity or this complex trauma conference that we were able to host with Zoom. Big shout out to the Harvard Global Orthopedics Collaborative. Kieran is a big mentor of mine as well to show me how global orthopedics can be done and paving the way forward. Dr. Madison, who's the president of the South Sudanese Orthopedic Trauma Society, is also a big leader. So these are kind of my 20%, should I say. So, I kind of just want to close off with a call to action in the story that I always tell myself. So I remember the first time ever learning how to scrub in into the OR. I was like sophomore in undergrad, and the scrub tech nurse was with me. And I've watched Scrubs, I've watched Grey's Anatomy, I watched all the good shows and whatnot. And I was like, oh yeah, some up there practicing my scrub, doing it in front of her, and she was looking at me like, no idea what you're doing. And she walked me through it and everything. She was like, oh yeah. She gave me like a certain time that I'm supposed to do each hand. I don't remember the exact process that she gave me because the hints changed, but one thing didn't change is the timing. One thing that I always do when I scrub in, no matter what, left and right hand, is I always say to myself like a mantra, like a moment to be like engaged and focused right before going to the OR, getting pimped like nobody's business. I always tell myself, like, it's a small prayer, I always tell myself, it's like, Lord, teach me to be generous, to serve as you deserve, to give and not to count the costs, to fight and not to heed to wounds, to toil, and not to seek for rest, to labor and not to ask for the Lord. So I want to end off with book recommendations. So this is a book that I'm reading right now by Dr. Beanie. So if you want to take a QR code screen of this, you'll be able to get access to it. Song recommendations, I'm always recommending songs to all my friends, buddies, everybody. 2014 Forest Hills Drive is turning 10 years in December by Jermaine Cole himself. If you want access to the song right away, you know, QR code it. And then album recommendations. So I listen to a variety of music all the time. You might recognize some of these album covers. This is what I've been listening to a bunch lately. Yeah, I have a wide variety of music that I listen to. But if you ever want to get coffee, if you ever want to hang out, this is my contact information. So hopefully you screenshot this one or take a picture of this if you ever want to link. And then lastly, what questions do you have for me? And can I please have your feedback on this presentation? I'm actually getting a grade for it, so please. You can pull out your phone right now. Just take a little QR code. It's not going to take too long, you know? Let's see everyone's phone. Any questions? Or what questions do you have? Thank you so much.
All right, thanks everybody for a great day, another great year compared to Orthopaedics Day. Next year will be 25 years, so celebrate a quarter of the century. Have a good evening, have a great weekend. Thank you all so much. We'll see you.